Chaos Theory by Tessa Crowley. Brought to you by Leanne Audio. Chapter 6. It is your reaction to adversity, not the adversity itself, that determines how your life's story will develop. Dieter F. Uchtdorf. Draco is intimately familiar with the physics of it, the effects of angle, velocity, rotational force, and has spent hours working it all out over countless sheets of parchment. He thinks about how complicated the math is, how abstract the rules are, how wildly different the results if any variable shifts even slightly, and he thinks about how it is all condensed into this: throwing a rubber ball at a wall. It's just a matter of training his hand-eye coordination, and all that complexity, all those pages of calculations and memorized formulae, all boil down to something so startlingly simple: instantaneous reaction. Draco throws the ball. It hits the floor first, then the wall, then returns to his outstretched hand. It is chaos given form, and the elegance of it is astonishing. Draco is in awe at the simple majesty of the universe, or rather, he would be if it weren't for a particular weight in the pocket of his robe. Mr. Malfoy. He catches the ball and turns his head. Professor Dumbledore is coming down the hallway in bright lavender robes, his eyes glinting over his half-moon spectacles. Draco takes a deep breath and tucks the little rubber ball into his pocket. Were you waiting for me? I was, sir, yes. Not for too long, I hope. No, sir. May I have a word? The headmaster closes the distance between them and gives Draco a once-over, his sharp gaze lingering overlong on his Ravenclaw tie. For a moment, a bare instance, Draco thinks he sees something like suspicion. But it is gone in a heartbeat, replaced with a wizened smile. Of course. Draco inclines his head in thanks. Professor Dumbledore moves past him and approaches the large gargoyle outside of which Draco had been waiting. Licorice wand, Professor Dumbledore says to the gargoyle, and it leaps aside with twice the deftness a stone sculpture should have, opening up to a spiral staircase. Draco follows him up and into the expansive office, glittering with 1,000 instruments, both muggle and magical. In another situation, Draco would be overcome by curiosity and asking 1,000 questions. But not now, not with the weight in his pocket, not with the weight in his mind. Whatever it is, Professor Dumbledore says, gliding to his desk and sinking into the high-backed leather chair. It must be quite serious if you're coming directly to me and not through Professor Flitwick. I don't think that it would have done to go through my head of house, sir, Draco says. He reaches into his pocket and sets the Philosopher's Stone down on the edge of the headmaster's desk. It glints low and red in the light. Professor Dumbledore does not react immediately. His blue eyes are steady, trained on it with a great but detached intensity. My, he says after a pause. You are one of the most powerful wizards alive today, Draco says. If you had truly wanted to make this safe, you could have crafted layers of impenetrable wards, put it under the Fidelius charm, locked it in a safe. Instead, you put it behind a series of booby traps that an 11-year-old can successfully surmount. In fairness, Mr. Malfoy, Professor Dumbledore returns, peering over his spectacles and up at Draco, I think it's clear that you are hardly an average 11-year-old. When you rule out the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true. It's Occam's razor, Professor. You made it recoverable because you wanted it to be recoverable. The only thing I can't fathom is why. Why would you bring it up at the feast? Why would you leave the first line of defense so flimsy? Why would you try so hard to make someone go after it? Remarkable, says Professor Dumbledore. Truly remarkable. I admit, Mr. Malfoy, when I saw you sorted into Ravenclaw, I was not sure what to think. But now I understand. I knew your father. You are not what I expected his son to be. I notice that you have not answered my question, sir. Dumbledore smirks. It would have been out of character if you hadn't noticed. Draco's nostrils flare, and he sets his face. Those booby traps were dangerous, he says. If anyone stupider than me went down there, they could have died. Dumbledore chuckles. I'd ask why you went down there, but that question answers itself, doesn't it? The Sorting Hat chose well. Draco can hardly believe what he's hearing. Is Dumbledore out of his mind? Draco is accusing him of putting students' lives in danger, and he's laughing about it? He doesn't even have the decency to deny it? If you must know, Mr. Malfoy, Professor Dumbledore says mildly, you are correct in your assessment. I did indeed intend for someone to go down there. It was meant to be a test of character and mettle. I just hadn't anticipated that it would be testing you. A test of character and mettle, Draco answers, anger rising in his chest and voice. Sir, this is beyond reproach. What could possibly... All at once, several dots connect, and Draco is almost knocked over from the force of the sudden, devastating clarity. Whereas, there is only one person in the school remarkable enough to call this sort of attention from the headmaster, and that person is Harry Potter. Whereas such a dangerous and elaborate test of character and mettle could not be undertaken lightly or without serious reasons of profound import, whereas the shortest distance between Harry Potter and anything of profound import is the Dark Lord. Therefore, Lord Voldemort, in some capacity, is still a threat. Further, Lord Voldemort is not dead. Draco hates these moments, when his conscious mind races ahead of the rest of him, leaving his body to catch up, dizzy, breathless, trembling. It's as though the floor has given way underneath his feet, and he can't figure out why, because he's too busy trying to find something to hold on to. Are you quite all right, Mr. Malfoy? He takes a breath, wills himself to calm down, to not think about the dark mark on his father's arm, about what this information may mean for his family, for Professor Snape, for him. There's time. There must be time, if the Dark Lord's greatest enemy can put together something like this. Does he know? Draco asks in a soft, measured voice. Does who know what? Does Harry Potter know that the psychopath who killed his parents is still alive? Remarkable, Professor Dumbledore says again. You worked that out just now? Yours is truly a mind for the ages, Mr. Malfoy. He has a right to know, Draco says more loudly. Am I the only person in this school who realizes that we are talking about a child? Conqueror of the Dark Lord or not, he is 11 years old. I feel like I'm the only person who cares about this, and I've never met him. Professor Dumbledore sobers a fraction and sits back in his chair. There are parts of this story of which you are not aware, Mr. Malfoy, he says. You were ready to throw him into a dangerous pit that could have gotten him killed. Tell me what kind of context could possibly make that permissible. He does not answer. He's leaning back in his chair and staring at Draco in contemplative silence. He's just a child, Draco says, wishing that meant more to people. A war is coming, Mr. Malfoy, Professor Dumbledore says, voice wan. Not tomorrow, not this year, but it is coming. A war is no place for a child. Then don't try to make him fight in it. Draco can't take this a moment longer. He turns on a heel and stalks across the office. Take that stone and put it where it belongs, behind some very powerful wards in a room no one knows exist, and leave poor Harry Potter alone. Mr. Malfoy, before you go... He stops. His hand hovers over the brass handle of the door that leads to the spiral staircase. He is half tempted to make a very rude gesture at the headmaster that will almost certainly get him in trouble, but he manages to resist. 100 points to Ravenclaw. Astonished, Draco looks back over his shoulder. Professor Dumbledore does not appear to be kidding. In dark times, there often isn't room for integrity. I am pleased to see that you are the type who will fight for it regardless. Someone has to, Draco says bitterly, before he can stop himself. He expects to be angry, but instead, the look on Professor Dumbledore's face is resigned, almost sad. Yes, the headmaster agrees. Someone has to.